I'd like to refer to a choreographer, two choreographers, on the topic of math. Maybe three, I don't know. But Mark Morris has frequently been quoted and been interviewed regarding mathematics and music. And I think that there's large discovery, perhaps even neuroscientific interest in correspondence between musicality and math. I come from a different sort of lineage in terms of choreography. Thomas referred to the 7 or 8 years that I danced with Merce Cunningham, and Merce Cunningham and the composer John Cage, who you might be studying this week, I've heard. It's also the Cage Centennial, and of course, John Cage's Trust is here at Bard College. Quite famously, Cage and Cunningham worked together for about 50 years, about 54 years, creating music and dance in complete interdependence. They would, independence. We work interdependently, but independently meaning that, say a 45-minute work would be created. They would then go and work on their own until opening night, and slam the dance and music together for the first time before the public. So the Cage had a very mathematical approach to dividing time, which often dealt with the I Ching, chance procedures, and later in his career, computer software. Merce's approach was a bit more visceral and involved a great deal of cueing and cue structures. For my own mathematical inclinations, I'm much more kinesthetic in my orientation, but I see another link maybe with software design, although it's not so present in my practice. But in the company's sort of sphere, we use a lot of software. So perhaps like Anthony, programmers are very important for.
There's a question right here. Up in front.
So it seems that both your work has a geometric kind of sculptural element to it, with the light cones, which are almost a sculpture, and the way that dancers move in cones, in circles, and also that both your work has an element that blurs the line between viewer and performer, so that the viewer sort of becomes a performer. And I was especially wondering how those two inclinations work together. When the audience becomes a performer in a way, when it walks through the time-based piece you're doing together, does it become a kind of living sculpture? What role does the viewer have in that sculpture?
That's a good question. Hard to answer. I suppose it's easy for me to roll it back historically to say that originally these solid light works were an answer to a cinematic problem, as I perceived about the present tense. And having conceived of line describing a cone as an answer to that problem, made the work and then discovered that I'd fallen backwards into two other areas. One of them was sculpture, of course, because I'd created, in trying to solve the cinematic problem, I created a sculptural space. And the other was the gradual realization that, I made a virtue of the fact that the spectator was vitally necessary, that their participation, their incorporation into the work was part of the point. But it was a surprise to then realize that actually they were also performers, as you correctly identified them, because one's negotiating as a spectator, and negotiating space with other spectators. And all the other spectators are for each person performs. And, but not in any theatrical sense. I think that's my difficulty in answering the question. But there's a way in which the audience is absorbed into the work, and individuals become absorbed. I mean, quite literally. It's been a very common comment I've heard from friends and colleagues who said, "Oh, I saw your installation." And the oddest thing was that I thought I'd been in there for 15 minutes, but I was actually in there for 75. And there's a way in which the experience of time gets bent, slowed down, altered. So it becomes a kind of self-sufficient world which absorbs and you become absorbed within. I don't think I've exactly answered the question, but I've tried to get around.
I'd like to participate in your question by remembering a few dance, sculpture, maybe historical axes. One would be Martha Graham's long-term collaboration with Isamu Noguchi, and I think they made dozens of works together. But that in that collaboration, sculpture rather than scenography was invited onto the stage. Let's say, for example, in a Martha Graham piece, Clytemnestra would perch on top of a curved disc made by Isamu Noguchi, for example. In 1976, Bruce Nauman was invited to propose a design for the Cunningham Company, and I think he presented 30 very massive industrial fans, which stood on stage and moved and blew air as well. One example, which maybe you've seen photographs of, is Andy Warhol's silver pillows that were invited into, again, on stage with the Cunningham Company. So these kinds of dance sculpture pairings. Dance as sculpture has a trickier meaning, and I think that myself and dancers riddle with that all the time. We refer to sculpture very often. So I think that's why I'm so interested in your question. Fluid sculpture, one could think of dance that way. And also maybe to refer you to the current exhibition in Berlin, 5 Minutes of Pure Sculpture is I think the subheading of that exhibition.
Over here, this would be Sandy. See this gentleman in the white shirt.
Well, what sort of concept or message are you both trying to convey to your performance?
Can you say that to
sorry.
please?
What sort of concept or message are both of you trying to convey through the performance?
I don't believe that works of art come with a label with their meanings attached, and I can talk, so when I talk about work, as I tried to a little bit there earlier, I'll talk about the ideas that are going through my mind, or what I think it may be doing, or what I'm trying to do, but I don't expect that in any way to stand in for what happens once it's being looked at. And I think the work gathers essential meanings from it being looked at and talked about by participants, by people. But having said that, the difficulty about a multimedia, a mixed media work, this is of course, is that bring together elements for various different reasons. Some of them completely formal, structural, sometimes because you like the sound of it or whatever. And it's very unpredictable exactly how it's going to, what it's going to mean, what it's going to seem to say. But I am personally very interested in the idea of the cinematic in this work. And I peppered the structure with cinematic references, whether they're to do with reflection or projection, or simply with time. I've also recognized that one of the things cinema embraces is the body. And I've been very lucky here because the bodies are right there on the stage, and I don't even have to think about how they move. But I see that as an extension of cinema. There's an eros cinema, which is, for me, has been diced up and spread around the structure, and which I hope will then re-emerge in some way. But I have absolutely no idea how. It's not something that I feel an artist has any control over. It's very interesting.
I think about the conditions that set a choreography often, usually with each piece. And in this case, the conditions involve a four-sided space. So the public will be looking at the dance as well as looking at each other, I imagine. And I agree actually with what was just said about the apparatus of cinema has been distributed. So light, sound, and maybe from my chair here, the moving bodies are the moving images in this piece. And so there's something very filmic about it. And I haven't ever quite worked in this way before, so for me it's been endlessly fascinating. And then really just as of this week, Monday, yesterday, we started to, now that the piece is nearly done, we're starting to coach performers. And just with a very, like Anthony said, sort of he peppered his structure, I would sort of say similarly, we're starting to coach performers in a filmic manner. So for dance, it's leading us to a lot of discovery. But there's no message. The damsel doesn't die.
Being no less committed to accounting time than Anthony and Jonah, it's my sad duty to report that our time is up. Just before we depart, I wanted to thank a couple of people who helped to make this possible. We haven't acknowledged the people in the booth, Dennis and his colleague who've been helping us all week. Carried around the mic, Mary Weston and Brendan Black for the dance team. And finally, I want to say how extraordinarily grateful I am to our guests today who prepared all of this for us, for you, for us, for Eunice and the dancers. Thank you for welcoming us the other night. And finally, let's all thank Anthony and Jonah.